Can a pilot change its entire season with a single mental adjustment? Is it possible that Lewis Hamilton has taken the first step towards his 8th title, just when we expected it? What Martin Brundle said after Monza changes everything. But in Monza everything changed. Penalized with 5 positions for an infraction committed in Zandvoort, started from the 10th position. Far from falling apart, Hamilton offered a masterclass for resilience. It wasn't just speed, it was a decision, it was strategic reading, it was the deep understanding of the circuit, of the airflow, the behavior of the tires in each lap. He was aggressive without being reckless, precise without being conservative. He pressed Russell for 30 laps as if his career depended on it. And maybe, somehow, it was. Brundle, with his surgical vision, noticed everything. In his column for Sky Sports, he wrote that seeing Hamilton in Monza was like traveling in time. Not because he was trying to revive past glories, but because he recovered that quality that made it different. The ability to adapt, to evolve when the world believes he can no longer do it. That is what makes a true champion. This mental transformation, this newly conquered internal peace represents a change of narrative. It's no longer about Hamilton against the car. It's Hamilton with the car. And that, in Formula One, is one of the most dangerous combinations that exist. To understand the magnitude of the change in Lewis Hamilton, it is not enough to look at the result in Monza. You have to go back a few races. We must observe the silences in the radios, the nuances in their post-carrier statements, the small track decisions that evidenced a much deeper conflict than the simple fight against the stopwatch. The emotional, sports, and technical context that surrounded Hamilton to the Italian Grand Prix was marked by frustration, mismatch, and overwhelming weight of expectation. When Lewis signed with Ferrari by 2025, he did it with a clear purpose: to close his career where he began his story as an amateur, in the most emblematic team of Formula One. But he also did looking for a new challenge, a kind of emotional redemption after the years of tension and wear in Mercedes. However, the landing was everything less soft. From the first tests, Hamilton met a difficult car, nervous in braking, unpredictable in medium curve, and with a configuration that seemed designed for another driving style, that of Charles Leclerc. Leclerc, already completely acclimatized to the surroundings of Maranello, took the performance of situations where Hamilton simply did not find grip. The comparisons were inevitable. And in an environment like Ferrari, where the pressure is constant and the cameras never go out, the errors are not forgiven and the differences are magnified. And yet, behind that conflict, a transformation was being created. Each simulator session, each post-carrier analysis, each private conversation with its engineers in Ferrari began to carve a new mentality. A less focused on absolute control and more focused on adaptability. Less anchored to the direct comparison with their days of glory, and more focused on maximizing what it does. What Brundle detected in Monza did not arise from nothing. It was the culmination of internal work weeks. Lewis began to accept that to win in Ferrari, he had to stop asking the car what he could not give. He changed his technical approach. He adapted his piloting. He adjusted his body language. He moved away from the constant regret and returned to cold analysis. He understood that it is not about having the perfect car, but of being the perfect pilot for the car you have. And there is the difference between a world champion and a legend. Anyone can perform when everything is in favor. The difficult thing is to evolve when nothing fits. That is the true story behind the change we saw in Monza. A change that did not occur under the reflectors, but in the solitude of the garage, in introspection after a bad classification, in the honest conversation with the engineer when no one else listens. What Hamilton lived before Monza was an emotional decomposition that became the seed of his competitive rebirth. In Formula One, it is not enough to say that a pilot has changed. You have to demonstrate it with data. And Monza, with all its history, its speed and its technical brutality, offered the perfect laboratory to measure with surgical precision the transformation of Lewis Hamilton. Because in this circuit, any weakness is exposed mercilessly. There is no space for excuses, only for results. The first great evidence manifested in peak speed. During the weekend, Hamilton's SF25 reached 365 km per hour on the main line, a figure that was not only the highest in the entire 2025 season, but also established a new record for a soil effect car in the modern era. This did not happen by accident. Ferrari had optimized its aerodynamic configuration to minimize the resistance to advance, taking full advantage of the low load of the Nazionale di Monza Self-Roma. But it was Hamilton who knew how to squeeze that configuration to its operational limits. And this is where change begins to be noticed. Because reaching that speed is not a matter of stepping thoroughly. It requires perfect synchronization between the deployment of the hybrid system, the thermal management of the brakes and the tires, the stability of the chassis and violent braking, and above all, an impeccable reading of the airflow in each sector. Lewis was not only fast, it was surgically precise. He knew exactly when to compromise a curve to maximize traction at the output. He knew when to accept a minimum loss to capitalize on the following line. What we saw was the execution of a technical plan with a strategist mentality. But the speed was not the only indicator. The second great proof of his transformation was revealed in his car feel, his connection with the car. Until Monza, Hamilton had fought against the SF25 as if it were a wild animal that could not tame. His constant complaints about the lack of traction, the subviring in slow curves, and the erratic behavior of the rear train were a usual part of the race weekends. In Italy, that disappeared. Brundle was bluntly in his diagnosis. He looks comfortable. He finally looks comfortable. That comfort is not something that is obtained with minor adjustments. It requires mentally reconfiguring the relationship with the car. Hamilton stopped fighting with the car. He began to flow with him. He adjusted his braking style, softened his curve entries, modified his torque application point at the exit. Small details that, added, make the difference between being in control or surviving. One of the most notable elements was his technical duel with George Russell during the first 30 laps. Russell, with a more balanced Mercedes in traction, marked a very solid rhythm. But Hamilton not only managed to follow him, pressed him back after return without making mistakes, managing brake temperatures, avoiding flat spots, and maintaining the integrity of his middle tire train. In that stint, we not only saw Hamilton as a pilot, we saw him as an engineer inside the cockpit. Reading data in real time, feeling the behavior of the rubber, translating each vibration of the steering wheel into millimeter decisions. And there is another aspect that cannot go unnoticed: emotional management under pressure. Monza, Ferrari's house, is the louder, emotional, and demanding stage of the entire calendar. Any error is magnified, and any success is celebrated as a legend. The running pressure before the red tide can be paralyzing, even for world champions. But Hamilton channeled that pressure as if he had been in Maranello for 10 years. His radio communication was concise, serene, free of reproaches. His body language when leaving the car transmitted tranquility, not euphoria. As if he had found something he had been looking for years. A point of balance between his ambition, his experience, and the imperfection of the car. And perhaps, that is the true meaning of its transformation. Not that now has a better car. Is that now he is better for the car he has. When Martin Brundle talked about Lewis Hamilton's mental adjustment, he was not describing a simple form of form. I was anticipating a silent threat to the rest of the grill. Because when a pilot of 7 world titles finds clarity, purpose, and speed again, what follows is rarely predictable. But one thing is safe: it changes the balance of power in the championship. And in 2025, that balance was already dangerously unstable. From this point, Ferrari no longer has a single competitive pilot. Now it has 2. And that is a blessing as dangerous and powerful. Because a team with 2 pilots capable of winning races can build a solid assault on the Builder Championship. But it can also be self-destroyed if it does not correctly manage its internal tensions. The relationship between Hamilton and Leclerc, until now cold but diplomatic, is about to be subject to its first real test. How will Leclerc answer an increasingly closer Hamilton? How will Ferrari manage team orders if in an upcoming classification they are separated by thousands? When does one have a better race pace but the other is ahead on the track? All these are questions that can no longer be avoided. Monza showed us somewhat more powerful than a victory. The return of a mentally renewed Hamilton, strategically focused, technically connected to his car, and emotionally reconciled with his reality. That, for a pilot with its history, is much more dangerous than any aerodynamic improvement or any new concept of diffuser. It is a silent message to the entire grille: the lion still roars. And now the big question is not whether Hamilton can win races. The real question, which should bother all leading teams, is if it can drag Ferrari towards a second half of the dominant season. Because if that happens, if you manage to maintain this technical and emotional connection with the SF25, then the championship enters into unknown territory. This is not the return of any pilot. It is the return of one of the greatest of all time. And he has done it with maturity, with self-consciousness, and with an exact reading of what he needs to be competitive again. Do not underestimate it. Do not rule it out. Do not terminate it. Because they did that in 2021, and we saw what he was able to do. And now I leave the question to you. Do you think this new Hamilton is able to alter the fight for the championship? Are we seeing only a flash, or the beginning of a spectacular final era? How should Leclerc respond to a partner getting closer to performance? And how should Ferrari manage this new internal dynamic without repeating errors from the past? Leave it to the comments.